All right. You all should have just gotten a alert that we are recording this. So this session is going to be recorded. It's going to be made available afterwards since some folks were not able to join. And I know that people won't be able to go back and reference it. My name is Kellen O'Brien. I am the Assistant Director for Alumni Fund Engagement. I've been working with Zarelli from our Alumni Relations Office on this event. It is part of Bolin Legacy Weekend. So just to get us started, this event is being held to honor Asian American and Pacific Islander Month. And like I said, is part of Bolin Legacy Mentorship Weekend. You'll be able to find a link to that in the chat. Again, feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself if you haven't already. Additionally, I'd like to remind everyone that this event, as well as all Bolin Weekend events, will center on the experiences of students and alumni of color. We are asking all attendees to be mindful of impact and respect these spaces and what is shared. Before we begin, we respectfully acknowledge that this event is being hosted by Williams College, which stands on the ancestral homelands of the Stockbridge Munsee Mohicans, who are the indigenous peoples of the region now called Williamstown. Following tremendous hardship after being forced from their valued homelands, they continued as a sovereign tribal nation in Wisconsin, which is where they still reside today. We pay honor and respect to their ancestors, past and present, as we commit to building a more inclusive and equitable space for all. Thank you so much. And I'm going to pass it to our host, Tyler Tsay.
Thanks so much, and really appreciate everyone for joining today. So my name's Tyler Tsay, pronouns by he, him, his, and I'm from the class of 2019. And I just I wanted to, as an intro, I am currently working in New York as a consultant at BCG, but when I was on campus, I also was co-chair of MINCO and part of the Asian American Studies movement. So very thrilled to be talking with President Mandel and with the group here today in terms of Asian American Studies. So I have a few opening questions that we can begin the discussion with President Mandel, and thought we could just jump right in unless you want to say a few words up front.
Just would say, hi, everybody. It's really great to see you all. So many old and new faces, friends, not old faces. That didn't come out right. Old friends and new friends. But it's really good to see you. Thanks. And to you, Tyler, thanks in particular for engaging in this conversation.
Absolutely. And I think this will be a great discussion. And just so everyone knows, we will be opening up for Q&A towards the end, as Keelan had mentioned. So we'll reserve a healthy chunk of time towards the end so everyone can participate then. But just to start us off, I think one of the key questions is really to better understand where the current status of Asian American Studies is, and what progress has been made, and starting there in the past few years, because I think there has been some good progress, and want to highlight that before moving into what some of those barriers might be to your program. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and thank you, Tyler. So everyone here knows I'm a historian, and I think it might be helpful to answer this question by going back just a little in time. We're not going to do the long historical story here. I know it's been frustrating to folks to feel like they had a good sense of what was happening, so I'm hoping I can clarify some of that here. And actually, I think, to Tyler's point, I think a lot of the story is actually a good news story, but it may not have felt or appeared that way off campus. So let me see if I can try to help explain what's been going on. So Tyler in particular is actually at the heart of this story. When I got to Williams in I started in 2018 in the summer, July 1st, but actually it was when I was on campus in April, and my first event at Williams, several students used the opportunity when I was just visiting right after I had been announced as the incoming president to raise the issue of Asian American Studies with me. It was one of the first issues that came to my attention. And I said then, it's something I've said many times since then, I'm a big supporter of the idea of creating an Asian American Studies program on campus. I myself come out of the field of Jewish studies and have seen the value and power of sort of concentrated study programs of this kind on campuses. And so it's always been something that I've been interested in supporting. And Tyler was on campus that year that I then became president, finally in July. And over the course of the year, he was on a committee that was running out of our, then this actually committee doesn't exist anymore, but it was the Curricular Planning Committee, the CPC, which had a subgroup working on creating a proposal for the moving forward of this program. And so now, just to give you just a little kind of background on how academic programs are launched on a campus, and maybe you all know this, so you'll forgive me for going into this detail, but just in case you don't, academic programs are launched by faculty, voted on by faculty. They're not presidential decisions. And then new positions come up through a committee, which is populated by central administration. That includes me, the provost, and the dean of the faculty, who chairs the committee, and 3 elected members of the faculty. And for any new academic program to exist on a campus, the faculty have to vote on it. So it's had my support. I've been actively removing whatever blocks I could from behind the scenes, but ultimately this is something that the faculty own and move forward. So that faculty committee that I was describing, Tyler was on it. There was student representation, and it included a number of the key faculty on campus who focus on Asian American studies, and some other faculty as well. And they proposed a plan that we hire 2 new faculty members and replace 1 faculty member who is going to retire in the next couple of years, and that would be the core group, along with others who are already on campus, to launch an Asian American Studies program. So the good news story is those recommendations were accepted in full, and we have moved that forward. The thing that had gummed us up had nothing to do with campus politics or anything to do with this particular program. It was actually COVID. So we had a year where we froze hiring, and we didn't add any new positions. But as soon as that year was over, we went back to hiring, and that's what has allowed things to move forward. So we hired Jan Patios in American Studies, and that was the first hire that had been suggested out of the committee, be a senior faculty member with tenure. She's a wonderful addition to our faculty, and she's here now. Then she and the program in American Studies, chaired by Dorothy Wang, who was also hugely instrumental in moving this program forward. They collaborated with their department and fulfilled the second position. That happened this spring, so they've now filled a second position. The retirement of Scott Wong, which was predicted, happened, and last year we knew that was coming, so we pre-approved a search in the upcoming year to replace him. So that's going to happen in the fall as planned, and so we're simply been putting the pieces in place for the next step in the process. And the next step in the process is for the faculty in the program to put forward a curricular plan to their faculty colleagues to vote on. I can't read the future, but I would be very surprised if the faculty don't support this plan. There's been a lot of momentum for it over the years, but nothing can happen until the faculty put that forward. And I think they felt like they had too much to do this spring with the searches they were running and the other work they were doing, teaching out of COVID and such, to feel able to do it this semester. My understanding, but that is work they have to do, so I can't promise what work they'll do in the fall, but my understanding is that Jan is thinking about how to move this forward in the fall. So I'm assuming that will happen as the history department does this search. So that's where things stand. I know folks are interested in the when question. As soon as the faculty bring it and it passes a vote, they would be cleared to starting a program, and then you need some. It would probably be the next academic fall that the formal program would be launched. The good news is, though, even without a formal program, all of these faculty are here and they're teaching courses. So students interested in Asian American Studies have a growing number of courses to choose among and between, and they continue to do that. And that capacity has been building as a result of this hiring. So maybe I'll stop there and take follow-up questions from you, and then later from others.
No, I very much appreciate that. And I think it's a great summary of where we are right now. And I think what you said towards the end is exactly the core of where I do want to go next, which is, what are those barriers holding up an Asian American Studies program from the faculty being able to propose? And I think just to give a little color to that, I think that as students, as alumni, as administrators, as faculty as well, everyone is talking in support of a program. And I think that's been the most frustration with the fact that a proposal hasn't been through and the timeline has continued to delay, even though that there has been this much support. And that's why I want to dive deeper a little bit into what is facing the faculty right now and what is really holding up the proposal from moving forward. And there's two things that I'd like to bring into conversation that I want to ask you about. And the first is, in terms of the Asian Americanists who are on campus right now, Scott Wong, currently a professor of history, is retiring. And unfortunately, we are seeing that Vivian Huang, who is in Widges, is also going to be leaving campus. And wanted to talk specifically about the plans to rehire for those lines, to be able to support more faculty on campus to move forward with the proposal, but also more in general, how this might play into the college's plan for faculty retention, and specifically retention of faculty of color. Because I think this isn't the first time we've seen, and obviously there's individual circumstances regarding each faculty, but this isn't the first time we've seen faculty of color leaving before we would have expected them to. And I think it's something that alumni are questioning a little bit. So I did want to bring that into conversation and maybe start with the hiring plans first and talk a little about the retention plans here.
Sure. So I'm happy to talk about that. First, let me just say that Scott has been on this campus for decades and is retiring at the end of a long career. So I don't want to conflate those two. I know you weren't.
Yes, very different.
I think most people know that, but I just thought I would note that. And this was, again, a pre-approved hire in Asian American history. So, and, actually, even that decision, I just want to be clear that that wasn't a given, actually, because departments will often, after a person retires after decades, will reassess what the needs of a program are and might say, you know what, we're going to take this line and ask for a different kind of line. And also the college sometimes will say, you know what, we're not even going to give you back that line. We're going to take that line from that department and give it to, another department that needs it. So the fact that we pre-committed to replacing Scott with an Asian American historian came actually directly out of Tyler's work and the work of so many of you and others to say, no, we really, really need to ensure that we have the faculty on campus to do this. So, and actually, I think it's fair to say it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for that kind of ongoing assertion of the importance of this. So well done. I think it had an impact, and I think it is actually what is directly leading to his replacement. It is true that people leave, and sometimes disproportionately certain fields, and you mentioned sometimes faculty of color, and sometimes it is, and I'll just honestly say, because for whatever reason, and personal conditions can vary, that there's a reason someone doesn't want to be at Williams or in Williamstown. Often, as you will all know from your own careers and lives, people move and leave places for other reasons as well. And I don't want to speculate on Vivian's reasons, but I can assure you we made we made it hard to leave. So she had reasons she wanted to leave that were personal for her. And, we respect that, and we celebrate people having the opportunities in front of them that they want to have that might take them away. But I can assure you, we work actively to retain the talented faculty who are here, and we do hope they'll stay. Is a hallmark of the college that often people do stay for decades. But there is obviously opportunities come, and we do. It's a hard one because you want to keep people you like here, but you also want to support them in reaching their own personal and professional aspirations that can pull them away. But the important thing is then, how do we replace not just sort of embodied diversity, but the curricular initiatives, and make sure, per the thing I just said, that a department doesn't say, in the end, we don't want to support that anymore. Luckily, the good news is, I think here there is a pretty wide commitment to Asian American studies. And so I think the faculty are interested in actively collaborating to make sure that position stays strong. I want to speak. You didn't ask the question exactly this way, but I did want to speak to the frustration sort of the big block. There is a little bit of a cart horse issue. So I thought your committee, the work that your committee did to articulate what we needed to launch a program was right. And that's why we agreed to do that, create those new lines. There was halfway through this year, some of the faculty in the program said, actually, we want more lines beyond what that committee had endorsed. And I think the CAP wasn't ready yet to say, we're going to go even further. We want to launch a program first and then assess what we think the needs are of the program. We're by no means saying we wouldn't ever hire any more people in Asian American studies, of course not. But you won't be surprised to hear there's a lot of pressure on new faculty lines at the college. And so we need that first step to happen. And there are programs, I mentioned I come out of Jewish Studies. Jewish Studies at Williams has 3 faculty members in it. The program's launched, it's existed for many years. It's actually smaller than what we're talking about here in terms of number of FTE. And so you can launch a program. And then when you launch it, you can discover that, wow, you have so many students in the program, so much interest, that it's really important to build it further. But because a 10-year line is a 40 to 50-year commitment, it's pretty, well, maybe not 50 years, that might have been an exaggeration, but let's call it a 30 to 40-year commitment.
Yeah.
It is important, I think, before we just say, oh, we're going to add a lot of lines to assess, not even just is there interest. I don't even mean that. It's like what field, how to grow. Is there interdisciplinary work we need to do? And, so before we move to the phase of increased growth, we want to first assess, is this the right amount of growth? 2 FTEs out of the gate in the way we've done for this program is actually quite notable and distinctive. And I think going beyond that at this stage is not likely.
I appreciate that answer. And I also appreciate the confirmation regarding Scott Wong's line in terms of a new historian coming in. I think that's something that also has been a question. And I think it's helpful for folks to hear about that. I think what you're mentioning also gets to another specific question I wanted to go into in terms of the current dynamic on campus, because exactly what you mentioned, there is no program right now. So the FTE that are being brought in for everyone who's on this call, they are being brought into certain, and please correct me where I'm wrong, but they're being brought into certain home departments and programs where they're also donating classes. Maybe half their classes are in for their home department versus half going towards Asian American Studies. And I think that's part of the dynamic that hasn't been explored as much. Because right now we have 2 tenured professors who are essentially core tenured professors in American Studies. American Studies, which as a whole is also growing rapidly and is seeing a lot of higher enrollment, more majors throughout the years. And in terms of putting forward a proposal, what has been shared to me by the faculty at least, and I don't want to misconstrue anything, is balancing that workload of an American Studies program with an Asian American Studies program, as well as the different leave patterns, the chairing, things like that. And I think the main question I had is how does the college look towards supporting both the program building that these Asian Americanists are doing for Asian American Studies, while also maintaining and growing the American Studies program at the same time?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I will note that all of our interdisciplinary programs here have faculty that have they wear multiple hats. Actually, most of the interdisciplinary programs at Williams have grown because somebody was hired into a disciplinary program but had an interdisciplinary interest, and they met up with other colleagues and then made a decision working collectively with their colleagues in their home department to essentially allow them to give up some of their teaching in that department so they could, and I'm just going to be honest, it's often a struggle. It's not just in Asian American Studies. I mean, if anything, if there was ever hesitation to starting a new program, it's actually that we have a lot of programs and departments, and we have to have chairs for all of them and courses for all of them, and then they put pressure on hiring, and we don't want to grow the faculty. And I can, if someone has a question about that, I can explain why growing the faculty beyond its current numbers is not an advisable strategy at this point. But that means that everybody we add means somebody else we're either taking away or trying to figure out a way to build partnerships and connections. So it's easiest for me to explain this. I'm a historian by discipline. I teach modern Jewish history as my field. I spent my entire career, 50% of my FTE at my former institution was in history and 50% was in Judaic studies. There was a kind of loose agreement between the units that I was doing half in each, but honestly, I'm a Jewish historian. So all of my courses were actually Jewish history courses and counted to both majors. And there's a lot of that goes on here, right? You don't have, we spend a lot of time sort of thinking about the pie and how we cut it up, but most people's specialization, they can teach quite a bit. And then they have these core obligations, quite right, to larger units where sometimes they have to teach the intro seminar, which isn't about their specialization, or a graduate, well, not here, we don't have graduate courses. That was something I had, but graduate, senior seminars, which are more general. And that's just going on all the time here. I mean, there's certainly the obvious corollaries of Jewish studies or Africana or Lats, but there's also, Cog Sci or, Poly-Ec, or lots of different programs here, which aren't disciplinary homes, and the faculty are public health. That's one we struggle with right now. There's a lot of student interest in that. And there's, only one person who has a line in something called public health, but everybody else is just being pulled in. So it requires a certain amount of coordination, collaboration across the units, and goodwill. But usually if the faculty are committed to the program, which I think our Asian Americanists are, I don't really worry that we'll have the resources we need to fuel the launching of a program. And again, I put my emphasis on launching. If we discover that in launching it, it's not sufficient, we can always try to figure out some of those trade-offs that I was describing about how we grow in one place and take from another place.
Absolutely. And I think it's exactly what you're mentioning. I think we're going in the right direction. And for the alumni who are on the call, for the students who are potentially on the call, we are heading in the right direction. It's a matter of time at this point. But that's the biggest question. And I think that's also the biggest frustration that folks are feeling. And I think that's where I felt very conflicted in terms of the alumni support for Asian American Studies. And I say conflicted not because I don't think it's a positive thing. I think it is absolutely a positive thing. But I also don't think it should be coming and driven from alumni, that it should be driven by the college. And I think that it is very telling in terms of the alumni and how they are coming to support and where they are putting, whether it's through donations and asking, continually questioning with the college, where is this Asian American Studies program? I wonder if that should be more, driven from the college. How can the funding, how can resources, how can that dedication outside just hiring lines actually support the Asian Americanists on campus? And it's a broader question, both for, how the college is dedicated towards an Asian American Studies program, as well as how alumni can continue to support and continue to donate. But I think it has to happen in tandem. And I'd love your perspective, and particularly around different administrative support, different ways to lessen the burden and labor on the Asian Americanists as they are program building, which is a huge task, where resources and funding can come into play and can actually help ease that burden.
Sure. I mean, I'm not sure I totally understand the question, but let me take a stab, and then if I don't quite answer it the way you meant for me to answer it, you can ask a follow-up. The college is almost by definition supporting this program, right? So in other words, the college resources are paying for the FTEs, college resources are paying for the administrative support in the departments that are housing these faculty and supporting the searches that are going forward. College, we also rely very heavily here at Williams on our tremendously generous alumni to support various initiatives of all kinds about things they care about. And there's obviously a relationship there. And I'm incredibly grateful to the alumni of Williams College and sorry, just a little side note here, away from Asian American Studies, there's hardly anything we've been able to do in the last year or 2 years where we've really been keeping the college open that isn't thanks to years and years and years of dedication by alumni to this institution, and then well-stewarded resources that we've been able to channel to, particularly to financial aid in these challenging times, and to keeping the college open when all kinds of difficult decisions were made. So when I say the college is supporting it, even the phrase "the college support" in some ways is itself a product of years of alumni engagement and then, as I say, careful stewardship of those resources. So it's a little hard to divide one from the other, but in terms of sort of before this group of people or additional current alumni are providing resources for this program, the college has invested heavily once the faculty vote on it or even before in supporting the people and initiatives that allow us to move this forward. I would even say more broadly, this goes beyond a studies program, and I know there are some students on the call and they may have different thoughts about this, but the Asian American student population on campus, which is supported through MINCO groups that you were involved with, of course, in the Davis Center, has other kinds of support that the college engages in as well through the staff in the Davis Center and in what is now an initiative project to build up and renovate the Davis Center and its people and its programs. So I think that so the college puts a lot of resources into this.
I think it's actually a great segue into, I know we've been going very specific on Asian American studies, but in terms, can segue a little bit into just broader the experiences of AAPI students on campus. And specifically, was a question that was posed, I think in the chat or previous to this. How are AAPI students currently supported on campus, and do they feel like they have a home? And I think that might go a little into the Davis Center initiative, but would love to hear your perspective in terms of that experience from AAPI, of the experience of AAPI students on campus right now.
Yeah, so I don't think I should speak for the students, and I know they're here, so I don't really want to speak for them and whether they feel supported or not. I can't answer that question, so I'll let them answer that maybe when we get to the more open conversation. What I can say is that the Multicultural Center, the Davis Center, seeks to provide support for students from historically underrepresented groups and from students of all backgrounds, and does so through both kind of official programming and also through the MINCO groups, which has a lot of student involvement in organizing and supporting in the initiatives that they want to engage in. We have a very large Asian American and Asian-born population on campus and growing every year. Next year, our incoming class is also quite large. And so, we do very much seek to support those students when they're here in their curricular interests, if they're on Asian American studies, but also obviously in everything else they want to study and through their lived experience. But maybe I don't know if we want to do that now, but maybe when we get to the question and answer period, some of the students on the call can speak to their experiences and where the gaps are, because I'm sure they'll articulate that far better than I could.
I think it's another good segue, because I think we actually have a question from the students in the chat. So happy to turn it over to maybe more of the Q&A section, and maybe we could start with that question from that student. Perfect.
Can you read it, because the chat's going way past me very quickly and I can't read and talk.
I've been scrolling it too. I appreciate everyone's posting in though. Let's see. So here's a question for the student. Seeing as Professor Patios and Professor Wong will be going on leave right after the other for the next 3 years, we only have one tenured faculty in the AAS American Studies Department for the foreseeable future. How do we reconcile the labor we are asking them to commit to the construction of Asian American Studies, in addition to the labor that they have with American Studies, which I think we chatted a little bit.
Yeah, we touched a little bit on this before. So faculty regularly go on leave. Again, I'll just note that in every program that I've referred to, faculty come and go as they build and run programs. The main way we deal with that on campus is we hire visitors when there is enough need to do so. Visitors can't build a program, to your point, Francis. So I don't. They can teach a curriculum, and that's very helpful. And actually, we have a lot of visitors on campus all the time. They have a harder time launching a program from the ground up. You don't need to be tenured to be engaged in the process of creating a program. That can be something that's shared across. And in fact, it's often junior people. They don't want to, from the labor perspective, we want to be careful and protect them. But it's actually often junior people that are interested in creating interdisciplinary programs and want to be actively involved in the process. It will end up being a joint partnership by everyone who is invested in the program going forward. We don't yet know, just to be clear, if the history position is going to be a junior position or not. So that might, and I'm not predicting, that's going to be a conversation with the history department and where some of the energy in the field is and what makes sense for that department. So that's a little bit in conversation with them, but it's not a given that it wouldn't be a senior hire. I'll put it that way. There are advantages and disadvantages to both, I should say, from the perspective of hiring and building up longevity over time. But I guess I don't know if this is implied in the question, but I guess I should just say it's harder to hire senior people. We were very lucky in Jan's case. I'm glad we were able to do it, but it's not a given that you can easily find a senior person, and it can happen. But you can actually lose some time in the searching. You can have, when you're targeting only senior people, and this happened in another department this year where we actually couldn't make a hire and the whole search crashed. So if time is of the essence, we also don't want to wait. And I think the faculty also don't want to wait. They want to get a program going. So.
Absolutely. And I think there's another question I can move to that I think I might broaden actually from Tweed, but because I think that for a lot of alumni, we were thinking or under the impression that a proposal would move forward from the faculty this year. And I think now that a proposal isn't, given the different dynamics with American studies, with leave patterns, et cetera, I think alumni are questioning, the direct question is, how can alumni directly support the creation of an Asian American Studies endowed professorship? But even broader, that I want to add is, how can alumni help? And where can that money really be used towards supporting the creation of an Asian American Studies program at this point?
So an endowed professorship is fairly straightforward, and I can leave my OCR colleagues to answer the how of doing that. I think we, hugely supportive. One of the advantages of an endowed professorship is it establishes it over time in a way that is a very profound impact on the college over time. And then frankly, program or no program, you have some, individual that's focused purely on a particular approach. So, I hear the frustration, and I sort of wish that I could say that it was even in my kind of, people get frustrated when the president says, I can't just make this happen. But really the next stage for any program on a campus, it's not really even a question of funds. And it's not actually a question of presidential dictate. The faculty, it's not put differently. Let me put this a little differently. In the proposal, Tyler, that you guys put in the committee, there's already a program in there. It's not actually that much labor to take that proposal, bring it to the faculty for a vote, and launch this. It isn't, and not to. They were really busy this year. I'm not in any way criticizing the faculty. They had a lot to do. The search they engaged in was actually more complicated than they expected. It took longer. It was more tiring. It just, we're all coming out of COVID. I think people, everybody. I hear it from my students. I hear it from the faculty. I hear it from the staff. Folks they just don't feel like they quite have the kind of capacity that they had 3 years ago and the energy. And so, so things are going a little more slowly than we would like, although not much more slowly. I have to say, when if it weren't for COVID, we'd be a year ahead of this. I don't think we're, 5 years trailing from where I expected to be at this stage. But, I think the faculty felt like they had a lot on their plate this year around this search, which again took longer and to complete than we anticipated. But the core of the program was articulated. And I could be wrong. They might have changed their mind. I haven't asked them since that was originally drafted out. But I don't think it would be that hard to submit that to a faculty for a conversation. And that's really when they feel like they have the capacity and energy to do that, when that would go forward. Which is to say, I don't think that's a financial question. Where alumni can be hugely supportive is in building up the opportunity, the professorships, as you already talked about, and the opportunities to support, the kind of student learning and engagement opportunities that go with these kind of interdisciplinary programs. And that would be phenomenal. And we are very grateful for those of you that have already contributed to this effort. And we, would be thrilled if others of you could support those students on campus that want to engage in this work. Which many of us in the administration are really excited to see come to pass.
Absolutely. And I'd add on top of that as well, I think that for alumni, the support and donations that you are potentially considering to the college that are directed towards Asian American studies, I think even within the absence of a program, can be used towards very vital areas. And whether it's research travel, administrative support for faculty, students, whether it is expanding speaker series to bring in incredible events that we've seen over the years at Williams College to really enrich the intellectual curiosity of students and experience overall. So I just wanted to add that on. But we do have another question. I'm going to go back and forth between students and alumni. So we have another question from a student that I want to raise to you, President Mandel. What are the ways that the college plans to support AAPI affiliated MINCO groups like Asia? That's Asian American Students in Action, for those who don't know. Because there is an increase of students interested in Asian American studies, how can administration build more communication with students on what they can specifically do in terms of visiting professors? Does the college have a concrete plan in which courses will be taught and if they will be related to Asian American studies? So a few parts there. But
that feels like a two-part question. So first of all, I should say to the students on the call, I'm always happy to meet with you. So if you want to come and set up a meeting and tell me what's on your mind and things that you feel like you want to, the college or me to be engaged more in communication, I'm always here and available. So I have open office hours. I'm happy to come to club meetings. I don't know if folks read the Record article about me recently. I don't launch myself into student life when not invited, but when invited, if you want to have a conversation, I'd be happy to get together and chat about particular issues. More broadly, in answer to the question, what I would say is the Davis Center initiative, which has really been focused, as I mentioned, first on a building project because we didn't have enough meeting spaces that were adequate for all the student groups that building supports, kitchens that were sufficient for students to create meals and bond over food and culture, et cetera. None of those buildings were ADA accessible. So we're in the process of, we're demolishing some of the current structures and the ground will be broken this summer for the construction project. And so the staff now are currently being housed in Bascom House. But the new building will have proper gathering spaces, significantly upgraded and accessible kitchens, study spaces, and more. And that building project is also meant to support, as I say, all of our multicultural community on campus, including our growing Asian American studies, our Asian American student groups, the MINCO groups that are affiliated with that project. It is also an initiative to support the people and programs that come out of the Davis Center. So there are ways, and this is another place where if alumni are interested in supporting these initiatives, we'll go to supporting all our Asian American students, which are a huge portion of our students of color on campus, as we've talked about, as well as other MINCO groups that use and engage with the program's educational opportunities, grants, speaker series, all the things that come out of the Davis Center. So the specific Asia and AAPI groups that work out of there will benefit from that project. It is, I hope, an expression of the college primary commitments to students that this has been one of the first things we did, even continued to marshal through with this project through the pandemic when we froze all of our other projects. This one continued to move forward precisely because it felt like such a pressing need to me that we moved it forward. So, but if there are other and particular issues that students would love to talk to me about, I'm always happy, as I say, to do so. On the visiting professorships, the way this works is departments put forward requests based on their needs. And so the faculty we mentioned in American Studies and Asian American Studies submit requests to the CAP for supporting visiting professorship lines to replace courses that are not going to be offered because some professor is going to be away. And the CAP, like all of its in all of its endeavors, looks at all of those requests and makes choices among and between them. We haven't done the visiting professorship request yet we've received the requests. We have the requests in, but we haven't yet made determinations of what is being supported in the coming year. But and of course, it's always a year out, right? So for the following year. So we're at work on that. But that obviously, the primary way that happens is by faculty putting forward the requests and making the curricular arguments about what's necessary to support in a particular year.
Absolutely. And I think we have an alum, Austin, who would like to make a comment directly. If you want to unmute and ask now, please do.
Thank you very much, Tyler and President Maud. I'm an old graduate, mid to late 60s. And when I was at Williams at that time, I was just a handful of Asian American students. And all I wanted to do at that time was just blend in. But now I see how amazing I'm deeply grateful to Williams. And Williams has always been a tremendous strength with an excellent faculty and presidents like President Mandel. So that's really wonderful. And I never thought my class was all that impressive, but we really are a pretty good group of students. And for my 50th reunion, our class donated over $40 million to Williams. So, this is something that we can do as alumni. And also, I think Williams has been pretty balanced, and they also have a teaching assistant program. And I like people that visit me from outside, because I live in Las Vegas. We're far away from Williamstown, but I enjoy people when they come to visit us. And I was able to, I didn't host them, but I took them around town. Two Chinese American students, teaching assistants actually, that came. One was from mainland China and one from Taiwan. They were both excellent. They were very well spoken. They're very knowledgeable. Well, but I want to make one cynical question, raise one, because unfortunately our country is deeply divided right now. There's too much politics and all that. But first and foremost, Asian AAPI community is the largest growing community in Southern Nevada and actually in the country. But first and foremost, we are Americans. We're proud of our heritage, and all of us should be proud of our heritage. But first and foremost, we're Americans. But we also wonder, though, about the way things like going on in Ukraine, where the autocrats are doing all these terrible things. And I'm concerned about Xi Jinping in China. My wife is from Taiwan, and she's deeply concerned about that. She actually thinks that the Chinese are sending out students to infiltrate our campuses and study what we're doing and try to take over things. So she's concerned about that. And I wonder if that's a concern in some universities where suppose the students come here and they try to steal our technology and things like that. And that's being rather cynical, but unfortunately, it might be somewhat realistic in some cases. Thank you.
So I can't speak to what's happening at other universities. I can say that our international students are an amazing group of students who contribute very actively to the campus culture in really productive and positive ways. And actually, I think one of the things I really value about Williams personally has been its commitment to increasing over many decades now, from the first women that came 50 years ago to the students that have joined us. Now we have some Ukrainian students, we have some Afghani students, we certainly have Chinese and Korean and Japanese students from all over the world, and many places I haven't mentioned. And they've really enriched our campus and culture. So I have to say, I haven't seen that as an issue here in the way that you're talking about it, but I can't speak to what's happening at other universities, obviously, in this space. But I'm really proud of our graduates and the many people who make up this community. And I think, we're all sort of deeply, and by the way, there's plenty of engaged conversations among and between students. We have Chinese students and Taiwanese students, and they disagree about the world we're living in and some of the things that are going on out there. And that conversation can be quite painful when it takes place, but it's also, I think, part of the reality of living in a diverse community that something that we're referring to here as Asian students is actually itself a very diverse community. There's Asian Americans is very diverse. Asian students are very diverse, and the reality is that the complex conversations going on campus, I think reflect in microcosm some of those realities. So, thanks.
Appreciate that answer. I know, Lily, you've been waiting on some of these questions here, so want to turn a little bit back towards the Asian American Studies, because the question is, could you expand on what the balance will be moving forward between Asian American Studies and American Studies, given the labor? And I think a related question that I believe came up is, who else on campus can support the work of Asian American Studies, faculty searches, and broadening a program? And I think the reason why it's I think you can tell, but I think it goes into that dynamic between American Studies, building that program at the same time as starting Asian American Studies at the same time.
Yeah, so this has been one of the surprises to me about what happened since you were here, Tyler. The original plan wasn't to have all the Asian Americanness that we hired end up in American Studies, and I'm actually quite glad that the historian is going to be in the history department, so we can keep. American Studies is intrinsically interdisciplinary, so it's not like saying it became single disciplinary, because actually, Jan is really different from Dorothy and what they study and how they approach their work, and the new person coming in is also quite different. And in fact, is close with the person she was closest to in her scholarship was Vivian. So in fact, there was some overlap there, but so there's interdisciplinarity in American Studies. So it's not like it's all becoming one discipline, but it's somehow administratively got more unified than we had anticipated. And that really has to do with internal kind of what happened with that second line and who we wanted, to be honest, it had to do in part because we wanted to move it forward, and the department that put in a request for it was American Studies. And if another department had put in a request, we might have considered it, but we had to wait. We would have had to waited for that to happen. And I knew there was some urgency to move this forward. So we took the American Studies recommendation or request for the line and moved forward with it. And it has led to the successful conclusion of a search. So I'm not sorry we did that, but it had the downside of putting this all in one place. If I could just flip the narrative a little on the downside of having it all in one place, is that it's actually easier in some ways to solve some of the other problems you've raised about like who's going to teach what courses. When that's all owned in one unit, you're not horse trading with religious studies or the history department or psychology saying, well, we need this person to teach a core course in our unit. So it's actually an advantage from the side of the program to having that kind of consolidation. If it has a challenge, it's actually more for American Studies than Asian American Studies, I think, because it risks over time American Studies being too focused on one thing. And I think that's something, over time, again, faculty might put in requests for lines, or the faculty there will think about how they want to address and think about American Studies in light of the fact that a number of resources have been sort of focused on one sub-theme of American Studies. And I can't say the college has a plan, because it's not actually the way hiring works. The faculty will propose how to address some of the pressures that come up, and where the college, by which I mean me and the provost and the dean of the faculty, play a role with this elected group of faculty, is that we look at all the requests that come in. And this is one of the reasons, by the way, nobody really asked this, but it's one of the reasons why mid-cycle requests are hardly ever granted, because we do all the hiring requests at once in a given year. And that's a way to make sure that we are considering the curriculum as a whole in any given year, and not just sort of putting out fires, but rather thinking about the entire thing at once. And this collective body won't be surprised to know that there are a lot of curricular pressures on the institution. So thinking about them as a whole is what we always do. So when in the future, Asian American Studies, if it wants to grow, wants to make a case for that, or American Studies wants to grow and wants to make a case for that, those requests come up with other kinds of requests that will come up from computer science or economics or sociology and anthropology or classics or music, just to name a handful of the ones I've seen this year. And that's, we make decisions then about where to invest again for the next 40 years, right? Because these are big decisions. It's probably worth noting, nobody's asked, but I think I need to answer the question of why not just add more faculty. I just want to answer that because it seems like the obvious thing to do, right? If alumni want to raise money and there's a need, why don't we just, add more people? And certainly the college has grown the faculty over time, so it's not, and in fact, it hasn't much happened since I've been here, but prior to my coming, there was a little bit of a growth for a few years. But I just want to make clear that, we have right now somewhere between a 6-to-1 and 7-to-1 student to faculty ratio at Williams. It's the envy of our peers. It's a wonderful ratio. It's one of the things that makes Williams special. But if we shrink that, it doesn't evenly distribute. So what you would end up having over time is some faculty of lots and lots and lots of students, but some faculty over time would have very few students because that ratio doesn't actually play out and so you actually have to spend some time thinking about what are the fields that are growing and what are the fields that aren't growing, and how do you think about curricular pressures versus what it's important for a college to offer, versus things we've always taught that we think a liberal arts education really needs to have, even if it doesn't have a lot of student interest. So you're constantly juggling all of those things. There's no one thing that's dominant, but it all comes into the conversation when we think in a given year about what the lines are that are going to be replaced in that year. And just because you don't replace in that year doesn't mean you wouldn't in the future. So it's an ongoing kind of circular conversation. But it's not a given, for example, that if somebody retires in a department that we just say, oh yes, you can. That's what I was saying about Scott's line. Like, oh yes, you can just have that line. Departments don't own lines here. And so each time somebody retires, there's a conversation about, what are we going to do with that? And how does it have an impact on the curriculum as a whole?
Absolutely. I think we got I appreciate that answer. And I think it does answer it holistically. I think there is a lot of pressure right now for hiring lines. I think you've highlighted the frustration, I think, exactly in terms of, hey, should we just add more faculty? But given the no hire freeze right now, I think that it makes sense to maintain that ratio. There is another alum, Yvonne, who would like to make a comment. I think that, I can turn to you, Yvonne, for that comment or question, and then we'll wrap it up with one last question from Scott before we wrap up here.
Thanks so much, Tyler, and it's so lovely to see so many faces that are familiar. And I am just reflecting on my own experience just about while on this call and just thinking about how lucky I am to have gotten to Williams. And then also I was at Williams and took Professor Scott Wong's first Asian American history class. And it changed my entire understanding of who I was and the history of, our people in this country. I learned about the Exclusion Act. I learned about Vincent Chin. It completely shaped my entire life. I look at Bill Ochi, who's on this call, who served as a trustee for 15 years. And, was an incredible voice there and helped me become a trustee. And Sulgi, who I met when she was a student and organized all these incredible Asian American activities, and then now is doing this, this heroic work at the admissions office to go no loans. I mean, Williams is the first school to announce that, which is incredible. And so many other familiar faces and friends. I mean, I was on the board for 12 years, and I have to say that one of the things that was really hard for me, so I spent a ton of time at Williams and I learned so much. One of the things that's really hard for me was I come from the business world where you just get things done. You're the CEO, you tell people to do things and then they do things and then you're done. And you can flex up and down on labor, you can sell more, you can grow new clients, you have competition. It took me a while to really figure out that the college is not like a business and it is so much more complicated. Maud's job is so much harder. There are so many more constituents. And one of the things I think that makes Williams so incredibly powerful and special is the faculty really own the school in terms of they feel such pride, they feel such ownership, they're so committed, and they, in many ways, govern the school with their faculty committees. That can be very frustrating for those of us on the outside who just want to get something done right away, including the board and including Maud, I'm sure. But it is also what makes Williams so special because the faculty are there and they're so committed and they're making decisions that they're going to own up to and they're going to teach these courses that they're passionate about. So I personally am so indebted to Williams and to Asian American Studies and want to see it happen. But I've been kind of learning along the way that we need to let the faculty run their process. And by the way, I was on the search committee for Maud. We couldn't ask for a more fervent champion of Asian American Studies than Maud. I know I've talked to her numerous times about it, and she is definitely helping us get there. I guess my question is maybe for the students. So we have the faculty, we need to let them run their course, and because they need to live with their decisions and they need to teach these classes. For the students, when I was running Chinese American Students Organization, I was very dumb and I didn't even know there were alums out there who could be helpful to me. So you all are much smarter. Are there more things we can be doing as alums to kind of support you all on campus? I know for me and for many of my friends, we would happily go back to campus. We'd be happy to do Zooms, be happy to think about internships or career things, but what else can we be doing as alums to help all of you students who are on the phone?
I think it's a fantastic question. And I think I'll add my voice to that, which is to say for students who are on campus in the absence of a program to call home while this is being happened, because I know, and I'll speak from my own personal experience, and I think this is going towards, the reason why this movement has taken 30 plus years for us to make the kind of progress even to this point, and we still don't have a program, is that a lot of what is going on with the program building, it is so centered on bureaucratic administrative processes that students it is almost impossible to be a part of that. That is driven by faculty. It's a conversation with the college. So I just echo, for students to continue reaching out to alumni. We're here to support, and in any way, whether it's funding for different events, whether it's different conversations with jobs, internships, outside, just whatever it is, I think alumni are here to help.
And if I could just jump in, I know the students maybe can, outside of this large group, reach out to the two of you and to others to answer that question more robustly. If you guys want to jump in now, it's fine with me. I know we're running low on time, but I just did also want to say that, I know how incredibly frustrating it is to try to get anything done on a campus, and actually, there are a lot of reasons why that's the case, some of which are good reasons and some of which aren't such good reasons, but it certainly is complex in the way Yvonne described. But the reason we're having this conversation, I started with this, is what students and now alumni have done over many years here at Williams. So the reason we have faculty that are advocating to create such a program is because students for years have been saying this is something we want and need, and so it takes a long time to get something, to sort of actively agitate and build something in this way. But actually, to my mind, and actually, I mean, in academic time, the last few years, there's been dramatic movement, really, again, largely because of work Tyler and friends did on campus in those first years those years just before I came, and then after I got here. So a lot of what's happened so far is actually a product of that work. And I think your desires and hopes in this regard are very visible to me and to the other senior leaders at the college. So I don't think it may feel when you're outside of having a conversation like this every few weeks that nobody cares or is doing anything or is thinking about this. That's really not true. I mean, at least speaking for myself, I can say that this has been something I've been actively working on behind the scenes to unglue sticky things. But it doesn't mean I can do every single thing that, and one thing I can't do is just create new tenure track lines. That's not a thing it's not even something I support doing for the reasons I've said. So it's not even a question of can or can't. I can't, but I wouldn't support it because of the way it would impact other things. But I do support moving this program forward, and I do believe we're going to get there. And I actually think we're going to get there fairly soon. That's the good news that I think I can share here today, based on what we've done so far and where I think we're headed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we are basically at time, and I think what you said, I agree with it. I think we're getting moving, and I'll just end by saying I think that we are all feeling a little bit of frustration in terms of the timing, but I think that we are in a really unique and positive moment, which is to say, I don't think, at least in my time when I was at Williams, and potentially folks also feel this, but I don't think we've seen this amalgamation and coming together of multiple generations of alumni in support of Asian American Studies, as well as faculty, as well as students, as well as administrators now. And I think that it is speaking towards, we are all in support. It's just a matter of working out the logistics and the timing here, and trying to get this as fast as possible, but in the right way. So I really thank everyone joining today, because I think it was a fantastic discussion. And if there's any follow-up questions, I'd love to answer myself by email or anything like that. But I really appreciate everyone joining today. And I'll turn to Keelan if any last thoughts, or to President Mandel, but otherwise I want to close out there.
I'll just say thanks to everyone. I appreciate your time and energy and commitment, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Happy to do so again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tyler and Maud. We will let everybody get back to your busy days. We will, this recording will be made available, so please look out for it. We made a note of a few questions that weren't able to be answered because of time. We will follow up with them. And we hope to see you all again very soon. And thanks to the, I want to give a special shout out to the students that joined. Thank you so much for joining and sharing your time, space, and energy with us. We are really grateful. Bye, y'all.
Thank you, everyone.